what really are the causes of acne?
The neck of the sebaceous gland, it becomes clogged. A bump forms on the skin. When it becomes infected by bacteria, it is going to become inflammatory acne. There are receptors on your skin which are called toll-like receptors, and then whenever you're taking a very fatty food or you're taking a very high glycemic index food, then you get more acne instantly.
What are the different types of oral medications for acne that are generally being prescribed? When should people take them? When should people not take them?
The problem with isotretinoin is that it has a lot of side effects. It will dry your skin out, it'll dry your hair, it'll dry your eyes. Putting 2, 3, so if you're using vitamin C, if you're using retinol, if you're using niacinamide, you can't figure out what is making you break out. Every time I get a pimple on my face, every single patient finds like, Doc Sahab, you have a pimple on your face.
Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to talk about acne. I think Acufix as a brand has become best known for acne primarily because of my own backstory, right? We're probably most famous for our salicylic acid products, which of course are again best known for acne. So today we're going to do a deep dive into, what is acne, what causes acne. We're going to look at do your diet and lifestyle play a role in its development. Then we're going to take a look at how to build a skincare routine for acne. So that's also a very frequently asked question. After that, we'll go through oral medications for acne and whether or not you should be taking them. And lastly, what treatments are available for acne scars. So we'll be covering skincare related treatments and in-office treatments. So to go through all of this today, we have with us Dr. Momina Zahir, who is a certified aesthetic dermatologist, and we're going to cover all of this together. I think it should be an interesting discussion because I'm from the cosmetics domain and she's from dermatology, so you'll get combined insights from both fields for this. So, Dr. Momina, welcome to our studio.
Calling Yasmin, thank you for having me again.
Let's start at the beginning, right? So let's start with what is acne?
So, acne is basically a combination of symptoms. Not everything that you get on your face is acne. Acne is basically your sebaceous glands, your oil producing glands. When they become clogged, then a bump forms on the skin, which is called a comedone. So, there are different types. There's comedonal acne, there is papillary acne, there is inflammatory acne, there is pustular acne. So, whenever your oil producing gland, as a result of multiple factors, it becomes overproductive, the neck of the sebaceous gland, it becomes clogged. A bump forms on the skin, we call it comedone, which is a whitehead. And then when it gets exposed to the surface of the skin, it becomes oxidized and becomes a blackhead. When it becomes infected by bacteria, it is going to become inflammatory acne or a pinkish red bump on the skin. And whenever it gets really, really bad and thick bumps and nodules are forming inside your skin, then we call it cystic acne.
So one of the primary reasons I think I really wanted to cover this question was that most people don't realize that blackheads, and pimples are all forms of acne, right? It's not, yeah, no.
The start of the acne is basically blackheads and whiteheads. The comedones that are forming, in medical terminology, we call it a comedone. So the blackheads and whiteheads are basically the starting point of acne that is there. So they are acne. That's called comedonal acne.
All right. So a lot of people like myself and even we've struggled with acne for most of our lives. So I think it's kind of worth also diving into what causes it, right? Because knowing the cause of something can naturally help people take better control of it. So what really are the causes of acne?
So acne is multifactorial. There is not one single cause of acne. As you mentioned, genetics plays a huge role. If one of your parents has acne, so there is a 50% chance that you will get acne as well. Then there are hormonal changes, like when kids are growing up, it's called teenage acne. Everyone knows about hormonal acne. You have teenage acne, and then in later life you have adult onset acne, which is also hormonal acne. But the teenage acne comes more predominantly on the cheeks and on the forehead, whereas the adult onset acne, it comes more along the jawline, which we name the hormonal acne, right? Then we have acne. The major role is of your diet. So if you're having very high sugar index by food, if you're drinking a lot of caffeine, if you're taking a lot of fizzy drinks, you're taking bakery items. So a lot of sugary foods, very high calorie food, which is very fatty, that does tend to make your skin more acne prone. And so your skin has receptors for those all the sugar that you take. There are receptors on your skin which are called toll-like receptors, and then whenever you're taking a very fatty food or you're taking a very high glycemic index food, there are receptors and you get more acne instantly. Like if you eat chocolate, if you drink coffee, if you're taking coke, and if you're eating a burger with that, next day acne is going to pop up on your face. Everyone has noticed that, right? Then your lifestyle. if you're putting on a lot of makeup and not removing it properly. So then a lot of comedones form. Blackheads and whiteheads skin congestion usually starts if you're putting on a lot of makeup and then you're letting it staying on, not cleansing properly, not removing the makeup. That also plays a role. Whenever you're stressed, so stress is the biggest trigger for hormonal acne. In exams, all of us has faced acne, right? So a lot of people come to me when their acne flares up only when they're very stressed, when there's a lot of pressure, when they're sick. It tends to worsen their acne as well. So there are multiple factors causing acne. There's not one thing which is causing acne. So it's all multifactorial. Yes, in younger kids it's more hormonal. Yes, in adults, when you're 30, 35 years of age and you're getting acne for the first time, it tends to be more hormonal. One thing, polycystic ovarian disease. Every young girl knows about PCOS these days because a lot of people are facing this. So that is also causing hormonal imbalance, a more increase in your male hormones and a reduction or a lesser proportion as compared to the male hormones of your female hormones. So when the androgens are up, you will get acne on the face and you will get really bad cystic acne on the face from that.
So one of the things that I've also noticed generally from people that I've interacted with who have acne, um, a lot of people come and ask, does diet play a role? What should we be eating? I had really bad acne. People would tell me, omit this, try that. And for me, that taking food groups out or adding something never really helped. But I've noticed for a lot of people it does. So I think one key thing is also this self awareness around what is triggering your specific acne. So all of these are risk factors, but then different people have different sensitivities to them. Right, so there are people who eat mangoes and then they'll get acne. I, for one, I could eat a crate of mangoes, and even though my skin is acne prone, I'm not gonna break out. So there's also this variability, and I think it comes with really focusing in and zoning in on yourself.
You need to know your triggers. That is what I'll tell everyone, that you need to figure out. I can't figure out your triggers for you. You need to figure out your triggers. Whether if it's a dietary trigger, so dairy for me is not a trigger. But for people, when they omit dairy out of their diet, they tend to get better, right? So dairy for me is not a trigger. But chocolates for me is a horrible trigger. Nuts, so they I can't have nuts or coffee in winters. If I have it even once or twice, I tend to break out really bad and really bad cystic acne. But now with the high sugary foods, so initially they used to say when I was growing up and when I was doing my house job like 15 years ago, they told us there is no role of diet. This is what was written in books, right? But now evidence-based studies have proven that if you're taking diet which has a high glycemic index, because so sugar is more inflammation prone, right? The more sugar you take inside, the more inflammation will be produced inside your body. So if you're having cystic acne, so yes, I agree that it is not going to maybe cause you comedonal acne, but whenever someone is having cystic acne, it might flare that up because it's pro-inflammatory, gives you joint pains, hurts your spine, right? So high sugary foods ke saath, it has been proven that sugars, fruit foods that have a high glycemic index, that's why I don't stop any food group, but I tell them to take it in moderation and identify your triggers. Because if something is triggering you, if you're drinking dark coffee every single day for whatever reason, and if it's making you break out, no matter the amount of topicals you're putting on your face, if that is triggering you, it's not going to work that nicely.
So another thing that I think we should discuss is actually the role of skincare itself in acne, right? So does skincare, in your opinion, can it cause acne? What should people look for, and what should people avoid in the skincare domain?
So, people who have combination to oily skin, if you're using very thick products, if you're using very occlusive products, like slugging is very in, that you're putting Vaseline on your face, and if you're having, so if I put Vaseline on my face, it will clog all of my pores and I will end up with really bad acne. So, thicker products and products which are occlusive in nature, usually people with combination to oily skin, they tend to make your skin worse, they tend to make it more oily. So you need to look at these things. I usually tend to deviate more towards gentle hyaluronic acid based, gel based moisturizers, lighter products towards for people who have oily acne prone skin.
One of the things that I've kind of learned over time is drying your skin out. So being gentle and not drying your skin out are two different things, but drying your skin out, which basically also means not, for example, moisturizing after you wash your face. So for me, for instance, even if I rinse my face with just water and I don't moisturize, my skin feels really dry afterwards, right? That in itself is not good for acne either.
And because आपको overproduction हो रहा है ना sebum का,
Exactly.
happening is
So I think on the skincare front, so coming back to the initial, like, the drying where drying your skin out causes acne. I think so. Quickly going through actually what the reason for that is. So one of the things that happens is when you wash your face, you're basically getting rid of your cleanser can't differentiate between the chemicals that make up your skin and the chemicals that need to come off, right? So invariably, even the gentlest cleanser is going to take at least some of the natural oils in your skin away with it. So what happens as a result of that is your skin transepidermal water loss is what you call it, and that the rate of that increases. So in an effort to cut that down, your skin starts going into overdrive, producing more sebum. So that's one of the things that happens, which is why moisturizing is essential. So some people think that if they have acne, they don't need to moisturize. And I think that thought is pretty problematic. You 100% do need to moisturize. Now, as far as occlusive versus non-occlusive moisturizers are concerned, I have a slightly different thought on this. One of the things is that comedogenic rating. So a lot of people actually come and they're like, they point out specific ingredients and products and they're like, oh, this has this kind of comedogenic rating, actually not understanding that the percentage of that ingredient matters. And the function that it's performing in the formula matters. And then the other thing they don't understand is that comedogenic ratings have basically been calculated by using 100% of the ingredient on the back of a rabbit's ear and then figuring out how that clogs the rabbit's ear, right? So they can be a guide, but they're not written in stone, and different people react differently to different ingredients. So that's one. So point one here becomes that when it comes to ingredients, different people respond differently. That said, there are some ingredients that I found are universally, so regardless of whether the texture of the end formula is thick or thin, there are some ingredients that I found will clog pores for most people. And for me, I think not even those. For me, the two key ones are coconut oil. Hands down, one of the worst thing. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
And people are cleaning their makeup with coconut oil.
If you have acne, it is horrible. It will invariably. I mean, I can use a lot of things on my face, but that absolute no, complete no. The other thing is cocoa butter. Things like cocoa butter will break a lot of people out as well. With things like Vaseline, and so I, for instance, I'm okay with Vaseline. I can use Vaseline. I do have breakout prone skin, but that works okay with me. I can use mineral oils and all of that stuff on my face as well. But these are two things that I found that universally, they will break. If you have breakout prone skin, they will break you out. It's just the fact that every person has a different genetic makeup, different triggers, and it's impossible for the person recommending it. Typically when clinical trials and everything are done and ingredients are tested, usually the way the results come in is, product or ingredient XYZ worked X% for X% of people. And that's how it is. And then there will be that 100 minus X% of people who it didn't work for. And you could fall into that. And unless and until you actually try the product, you don't know whether you're the lucky one who the product will work for or the unlucky one.
Even treatments on identical twins who had really bad cystic acne, right? Even ranging from chemical peels to LED blue lights to a high frequency acne therapy to microneedling. They responded differently. So identical twins, both of them had cystic acne, so they've responded differently. And I was doing the same. So I was the same person doing the same treatments. For them, their skin wouldn't tolerate. So one of them wouldn't tolerate salicylic acid. Every time I put it on her face, and they were identical twins. So wahi baat ki things work differently. I was doing CO2 combined with microneedling for one, and the other one's skin wouldn't even tolerate microneedling. She would break out like crazy. So, and they were identical twins. So, easily I've seen I cannot even give skincare to identical twins, which is similar, because there are not everything, and the same ingredient will stop working for you at times. This is what I've realized. At times I leave a product for a while because the same product, the same strength, the same thing that I had been using for a long while, it stops working for you at times. The weather changes. I change my moisturizer according to weather. Your diet changes. Your stress levels change. Your hormones change. Basically, your frame of mind changes. Everything changes. So, and the way you're responding to product, absolutely. But then even simple, अगर आप अपना पानी पीना कम ज़्यादा कर दे, तो that changes आपकी skin में immediately makes a difference. तो इस तरह से ये चीजें, and according to weather, अब जिस तरह इस summer में I wear a very lightweight moisturizer. Winters में I will switch over to a thicker moisturizer. So इस वजह से ये चीजें matter करती हैं.
Okay, so at this point we basically talked about what acne is and what causes it, right? So let's start getting into treatments now. And before we actually get into what we recommend as a skincare routine for acne, I really want to cover oral medications for acne. I think for me, at least, this is a very contentious sort of topic. But before we dive into my own personal experience with them, I'd actually like to hear from you. So, what are the different types of oral medications for acne that are generally being prescribed? When should people take them? When should people not take them? Caveats, etc. So I kind of want to do a deep dive into that.
So there are two kinds of medications that you give. One is oral antibiotics. There are different groups of antibiotics. I'll get into that. And then there is vitamin A derivatives, which you call isopretinoin or Accutane famously because it's the brand name. Yeah. So, or Accutane, everyone knows Accutane, right? So in the antibiotics, you have tetracyclines. Mm-hmm. Tetracyclines, there's doxycycline and there is minocycline, which is very commonly given. Doxycycline, everyone, can I take the brand names? Can I take the names like Roxa, Minoderm? Everyone knows these. So everyone who's had acne knows Doxa, right? And there is the macrolide group of antibiotics. Earlier we used to give Rituxan, we stopped giving that, but now we give azithromycin, which is Azomax. Everyone knows Azomax as well. So you're giving doxycycline. This is the gold standard. The first line is doxycycline and Doxa, which I think everyone with acne has taken in their lifetime once in a while. And so tetracyclines and macrolides are the antibiotics that you take, and then you have the vitamin A derivatives, which are the retinoids, the oral retinoids. In top of line among this is isopretinoin or the Accutane. This is the most controversial medication for acne, I think. So it has its pros, it has its cons. But so with antibiotics, people who are facing inflammatory acne, so it doesn't work for comedones. People who have blackheads and whiteheads, it's no use using an antibiotic. But people who have red acne, who have red cystic painful bumps on the face, as a first line, we start doxycycline. If that doesn't work out, and you can give it for up till 4 to 6 months. So people don't realize when I tell them that you have to take it for a longer period of time. This is the standard dose. This is something that you can take once a day. You can take up to twice a day, and you can take it for 4 months, even 6 months. I usually try to limit the dose. I start with a month, maybe go up to. So I try to limit the oral medication as much as I can. I'm not a big fan of that, but yes, there are instances where you have to give, because so with acne, the biggest thing is you need to stop inflammation. Why? The earlier you stop the inflammation, you will prevent the scarring from forming. So acne is something that needs to be settled down, because it is there on the face. It is ruining a person's self-esteem, because the first thing that when I got acne as grade 7 student, right? So when I went back to school after the summer break and I had really bad cystic acne on my face, every kid would make fun of me. And you've seen, being in Pakistan, everyone is going to point out, you have a pimple on your face. Look at your face. What have you done to your face? Like, is this not what we've seen? Every time I get a pimple on my face, every single patient of mine is like, Roxab, do you know you have a pimple on your face? Obviously, I would know there's a pimple on my face, right? So with acne, there are instances. There are people who are having really bad cystic acne, and they're like that we're okay with the way this face is looking. Then you don't give. So you need to. It's a case to case basis. You need to see where you want to give the antibiotics. So whenever there is red acne, inflammatory acne, cystic, painful acne, and whenever there is a scarring potential on the face, if someone who has maybe 6-7 bumps on the face, but I can see scars already forming on their face, I would give it to them. So if the profession demands they don't have a scar on their face, right? So I have celebrities coming to me, 4-5 pimples on their face is something they just cannot have on their face, right? So you see case-to-case basis, then you have Accutane. So Accutane is basically isopretinoid. It's a vitamin A derivative. It is the medicine that works on all 4 mechanisms of acne. It reduces the sebum production. It shrinks the gland. It has a bit of a bacteriostatic activity as well, antibiotic activity as well, and it removes the dead skin as well. So it will act on all 4 levels except for the hormonal part. It will act on all the 4 mechanisms and pathogenesis of acne. This is a medication that and it will work for your comedones as well, for your blackheads and whiteheads as well. So people who have a lot of comedone acne, I have girls who have full faces covered with comedones, right? So in there, I might give it maybe for a month or so. And now so initially it used to be that you have to give 0.5 to 1 milligram per kg body weight for good 6 to 9 months, right? Now the view is changing. Now new studies have come up that you give a lower dose of isopretinoin for a shorter period of time, so as to prevent scarring. So basic aim of giving oral medication in acne is to prevent scarring, to stop the inflammation. People have really bad cystic acne. It's really painful as well. You can't sleep on your side. You're bleeding on your pillow. it is that painful as well. Not for a lot of people, maybe just 3 or 4% of people. Accurate is something that I would just close my eyes and immediately I'll see someone's face and I'll write their blood test down. Because the biggest problem with isotretinoin is that it has a lot of side effects. It gives you a lot of dryness. It will dry your skin out, it will dry your hair, it will dry your eyes. Then it will cause bleeding lips. There are times people, the commonest thing that if I start isotretinoin in winters, it'll give you a nosebleed because of dry skin, right? It gives you hair fall. So I've had 3 cycles of isotretinoin in my lifetime, and that is all that you can have. And I've lost most of my hair to isotretinoin. It's something that they have proved that it is usually irreversible. The hair loss and hair thinning that you face from isotretinoin, in 80% of the people, it is usually irreversible. You won't get that hair back. So there are people who have hormonal disturbances because of isotretinoin. So you can't give it to someone who's planning a pregnancy as well. So there are limitations to this, right? With antibiotics, it's not the case. Yes, with tetracyclines, the doxycycline, the minocycline, you can't give that. You can get a bit of teeth staining. You can get photosensitivity from that. You can get, but with azithromycin, it's a very safe medication. You can give it to people if they're planning a pregnancy even. So this is something that needs to be seen. Someone who's just had a baby and their hormones are shifting and they're breaking out really badly, it's better that you give something like azithromycin, because already, so you have to see case-to-case basis. A young mother who's postpartum, whose mental health is already deteriorating, you need to give them something at that time for a quicker relief. Because whenever you're adding antibiotics to cystic acne, if topical skincare is going to take, its minimum takes 4 or 5 weeks to start working. And for a topical retinol or retinoid, 12 weeks at least to start working, right? So if someone can't wait for 3 weeks, for 3 months, so they need to be given something oral to bring the inflammation down. At times it's very important because so you know well, Propionibacterium acnes is the bacteria that is there inside the skin. It is causing acne. So at times you need to treat the Propionibacterium. No amount of skincare is going to do that for you. If the Propionibacterium infection is there, yes, there are products like benzoyl peroxide, but benzoyl peroxide, in my experience, I found is that a lot of people, more than 50% of people, they react to it badly. It tends to burn the skin. That is why I'm not a big fan of benzoyl peroxide. I've ended up burning my face with it as well. So multiple times, not once. So not a big fan of benzoyl peroxide for my face.
So I want to get into my experience with with acne medications, oral medications as well, because I have had a couple of years worth of experience with it and it was not good at all. But before I get into that, I want to actually talk about other drugs as well that are popularly given these days: spironolactone and hormone treatments.
So basically, not a fan of hormone treatments. Yes, whenever so in PCOS. Yeah, whenever there is hormonal imbalances inside your body where the androgens are high, you usually tend to give an androgen blocker. Like spironolactone or aldactone, that's commonly known, is an androgen blocker. What it's going to do is it is going to block the dihydrotestosterone, which is the precursor hormone for the testosterone. It's a DHT blocker. It's going to block the hormone. So it is going to block the production of the hormone. It is going to reduce the testosterone hormone inside your body. And yes, for people who are having hormonal acne. So hormonal acne, normally on examination, we say when it's coming along your jawline, it's coming closer to your cycle, that's your hormonal acne, right? So whenever there is hormonal acne, there is nothing that matches spironolactone. Spironolactone is a very, very good alternative. And so oral contraceptive pills or hormones, when people are facing PCOS, they tend to be given. I'm not a big fan of hormonal therapies because I've seen that if you put people on hormonal therapy, so it tends to mess up their cycles. And so I'm not in my practice, I really, maybe once or twice a year, I'm going to prescribe hormones. I do prescribe spironolactone on a daily basis for people who have PCOD and their testosterone level is high. Whenever there is hyperandrogenism, whenever the androgen is high, nothing matches the role of spironolactone. But with OCPs, I'm a bit reluctant, but there are people who recommend OCPs, and yes, with OCPs the acne tends to clear up because whenever there's going to be hormonal acne, if there is a hormonal imbalance, once your hormones regulate, the acne goes away. So people who have been on OCPs, but the biggest OCPs are so commonly Diane, Yaz, Pamela. Diane is the most common one. Everyone knows Diane, right? So people have been on Diane. The moment they leave Diane, the acne comes back. So that is also one of the issues that the moment you leave the pills, the acne will come back. If you're having PCOS, losing weight, leading an active lifestyle. Losing weight is important, but if you're not leading an active lifestyle, that also matters. Whenever there's hormonal imbalance, the more exercise you get in, so it improves your hormones, right? So you need to improve your sleep as well. Whenever you are not, so if, and it doesn't matter if you're taking a 10-hour sleep during the day. It needs to be at the proper time. If you're not sleeping at night, your cortisol levels are imbalanced. Once your cortisol is out, if your sleep is not that great, once your cortisol level is deranged, then all your hormones are going to mess up. It's going to mess up your androgens, it's going to mess up your thyroid hormone as well. So you need to fix your sleep cycle, you need to fix your lifestyle, you need to work out, you need to lose the weight. That will really, really improve hormonal acne as well. So medication has its role, but in hormonal acne, I've realized that lifestyle modification is the center of everything.
So that kind of brings me to my experience as well. And this is something, so I first started getting acne when I was 16. Started getting it, doctor gave me a doxa. So I come from a family of doctors as well, one doctor to another. Anyways, the doctor gave me a doxa. I was on a 4 month course. uh, you don't feel great when you're on antibiotics. They do have their set of side effects, and that's my primary contention with all of these drugs, is that they do have their fair share of side effects, which people aren't generally aware of. Okay, so I went through that 4 month course. The moment I came off of it, there were no skincare modifications or anything along those lines. At that point, I think in those days, because this was more than 10 years ago, skincare wasn't really talked about either that much. Now it's become more popular. Now it's become a thing, but at that point, it really wasn't. So I was on a 4 month course of Adoxa, came off of it, the acne came right back. Okay. The doctor put me back on Adoxa, and I didn't enjoy being on it because it just makes you feel lethargic and it doesn't make you feel good, right? So once that was done, again, left it again the acne came back, right? So then I kind of just stopped taking it. Went to another doctor. He was like, "What did the last person give you?" I said Adoxa. And he wrote the same prescription down for me again. And I started asking questions. Yeah, exactly. I started asking questions. And this was a very well-known doctor. It wasn't somebody like, it was someone who at that point in time was taking, 10 years ago, had a consultation fee of 3K plus, right? So it was somebody like that. And then um, so I started asking questions. I was like, look, already I've already taken this. It didn't work for me. You're giving it to me again. If you want to ask so many questions, you can go somewhere else. I was like, thank you so much, I will. And I was like, thank you so much, I will. Right. So that happened, and through all of this time, like my acne was there. Nothing was fixing it. It would get worse. I noticed before exams, like I said, that was something that would aggravate it for me. Food didn't really make a difference. That happened then. So some doctors had been, people that you meet, dermatologists that you meet, like socially or whatnot. So a lot of them had been recommending Accutane because my acne is very severe, and they're like, "Why don't you take Accutane? Why don't you take Accutane?" And for the longest time, I wasn't taking it primarily because my mom had also been resisting because, and I think this is also something people don't know. Accutane, at the end of the day, it's a chemotherapy drug. It's that strong a drug. It's given for different types of skin cancers as well. There's an entire protocol for how it needs to be administered. Your LFTs need to be monitored. Anyway, so after my acne had been around for about 7 years and it wasn't going away, at one point we decided, okay, let's try isotretinoin. So went to this doctor. First off, he did not recommend a blood test, right? I got that done myself because
That's
I was
something
aware
that a baseline CBC,
is
LFTs, and your
necessary
fasting lipid profile. These are three baselines that need
to be
that
done
you
before
need
you take
before.
the
Because
test.
so since our lifestyles have gone so horrible, we're eating so bad. Young people come to me with elevated cholesterol levels, right? So you can't prescribe Accutane to them because on its own it causes hypertriglyceridemia. This is a documented side effect. It ranges your LFTs, documented side effect, and changes in your blood work. These are all documented known side effects, and you need to monitor them every month because that is how you give isotretinoin, right? So these are all documented side effects. The other things, the dryness, the nosebleeds, the hair loss, all these things, these are also documented. So there is a whole long laundry list of side effects that isotretinoin can give you, right? It works wonders, but it is not for everyone. Yeah. So what I tell, so the young girls come to me, Accutane de dein, Accutane khila dein. I want to start Accutane. So I tell them, why don't you start with the topical formulation first, and let's see if that doesn't work out for you. Then we might think about it, because people think it's an easy fix, it's a quick fix. It's not a quick fix. People who've had Accutane, we've had 3 cycles for good 9 months. I've had every medicine for acne that you can. I'm 38 right now, right? So I've suffered through this through whole of my teenage, through whole of my medical college. I've had really, really bad acne. Right? So I've been there, done that, taken all of these things, and I'm a firm believer of good skincare and the least possible amount. There are times and there are cases where you cannot say skincare will only work. You have to give someone an oral antibiotic or oral isotonic. So there are cases that it's everything. It varies from person to person. A sibling will come. I'll put her on isotretinoin. Other sibling will come. I'll just give her probably a couple of things in skincare and a face wash, and that's about it. And just good advice on lifestyle modification. That's about it. Nothing else. So it varies from case to case, but you shouldn't be putting people on oral antibiotics because so you said that you don't feel, but with the oral antibiotic, you can get an upset stomach, you get bloating, you get nausea, you get that irritable metallic taste in your mouth. So there are so many things that
The critical thing is antibiotics overall increase risk of all cause mortality as well. I mean, they
so they tend
upset
to
a lot
increase,
of things
they
in your
upset a
body.
lot of things and they tend to increase. So azithromycin, right? I stopped giving azithromycin in my practice for acne. Why? Because it's being used for drug resistant typhoid. We have drug, so acne will not kill you, but drug resistant typhoid will kill you. So I've just stopped giving it in my practice for the last couple of years, except for very few. Maybe like every week I'll give it to one person, and I'm seeing 10 to 12 people with acne. Acne has also sort of become my niche as well because I have suffered from acne all my life, so I can relate and I can understand when someone is going through that, whether it's a kid or it's an adult woman. So I can understand and relate what they're going through physically as well and emotionally as well, right? So that is why it has become a niche, and yes, because I've been through that, so I tend to guide them a little bit better than others.
Okay, so coming back to sort of my own experience with isotretinoin. So like I said, first off, the doctor didn't really ask for any blood work, right? So that's one of the first things that happened. Um, After that, I sort of had this, I started experiencing these symptoms, and the onset was really slow. So it was kind of really difficult to connect them back to the drug at that point, right? So they started off as like some fatigue or whatnot, but very soon it turned into like, by week 4, it was basically so bad. My muscles ached really badly, even when I was climbing upstairs. And I'm a very, like, I exercise, I'm generally a fit person. So, climbing upstairs isn't an issue, but at that point, it was painful. I was also getting like these depressive episodes. Little things would make me cry, and that's not like me either. It was ridiculous. And then it hit me, something's wrong. And then I realized maybe it's this drug because I was aware that isotretinoin has side effects, right? Because I'd done my own research. I was very aware of the side effects. So I called up the doctor and I said, I was like, look, this drug is, I'm getting these symptoms. Do you think it could be this medicine? And he's like, oh, no, I've given this medicine to so many people, and people's parents, they come and thank me कि आपकी वजह से हमारे बच्चे की शादी होगी, like, for people who don't understand Urdu, my kid got married because of you, thank you so much, Roxab. And I was like, I'm not taking this drug anymore, I'm cutting it out. And it was the drug, because when I cut it out, and I cut it out pretty early, like within the first 4 to 6 weeks I'd left it, right? Within a few weeks, within a week or two, the symptoms dissipated. And I think that was a good decision because for me, my health is more important. Your skin is one aspect, but my health and my ability to move around freely and physically, that's very important to me.
So that's something that does happen, but very rarely. Yeah. But it doesn't. It didn't suit you. So you need to have a follow up. You need to get the labs done on follow up, and it needs. So isotretinoin. That is why I don't tell people that girls come to me, give me isotretinoin, give me isotretinoin. So it's something that is not to be taken lightly, and it has become known for causing clinical depression, for suicidal tendencies as well. So isotretinoin is not an easy drug to take. It's a very difficult drug to take. That is why whenever I'm putting someone on the medication, so I tell them that you will require follow-ups, you will require the lab works, and you will have to be a bit patient with this as well. At times it flares up your acne. It makes it multiple times worse. Like with the topical retinol, when you're putting it, it flares up your acne. You can actually get really bad cystic acne from Accutane as well. So there are multifacets to it. Yes, it is a wonderful drug. For the right person, it works magically and it tends to cure cystic acne, right? But you have to wait from person to person. It needs to be case based. And I'm not, so I try to focus what I tell people is when they come in for a first consult. If there is an absolute essential need for an oral medication, I'll put them on oral medication, or I'll ask them that what is, and that acne will take a little time for it to start settling down. So you need to keep 6 to 10 months in mind. This is what I tell people. If they say that we're in a hurry, we're in a rush, so I might put them, someone's getting married, there's some other issue, I might put them on oral doxycycline. But with oral isotretinoin, I tend to tell them that, see, you need to be mentally aware that you need to take it for a while. It's going to take a time. It is going to give you this trouble. Dryness, dry mouth, dry eyes, dry nose, that is something that happens to everyone. Like the muscular pains that you face, the anxiety, the depression, the mood swings, that has become something that's become very common as well. If I'm giving isotretinoin to 10 people, 8 out of 10 people will say face that. At times, I've had to stop it because it is giving people a lot of anxiety and stress. So I've had to stop the drug. I've had to stop it once. I was doing my house job then. A girl suddenly got partial deafness of the ear. That is the only thing that had happened in the last 15 years. But I still remember that because someone had that side. And that's it. When we opened up the whole leaflet, it was there in the small print somewhere. That documented.
Even an anal fissure. Somebody I know who got an
Anal
anal fissure
fissure is
with the drug.
something that's very common because it gives a lot of dryness, it gives you constipation, right? So anal fissure is something that's not uncommon, I've heard. But deafness with that, it is written very down below in the fine print, in the so many side effects that's there. So, but the reason I remember it because it happened to one person. So that puts you off the drug. Even writing that drug, that puts me off a little bit. So I tend to, whenever I see someone who's experiencing a side effect, there are times that I'll think, whenever I'm prescribing again to someone, I'll think 10 times before writing it. And then I'll see whether it's absolutely essential or not. Because when people are facing side effects, it is a medication. Whenever you're taking medication, whether it's oral, even the topical medication, don't we get irritable skin? We can get contact dermatitis. So with every medication, it is a medicine. When you're putting medicines on your skin and you're taking orally, especially orally, because it's going to affect your whole body, starting from your gut health to the rest of your body, right? So with oral medications, I tend to be a bit stingy. I try not to prescribe a lot of them and not too freely. I'll put them on skincare for a month and I'll tell them to come back. Please come back for a follow-up. Let me see if it's working for you. In 4 weeks, you do tend to see results. You start seeing results with skincare, right? So you realize that it's working for you or not. Then I say, okay, I might put you on an oral. Let's do skincare for a month and then please come back. This would be my approach when I'm seeing someone for the first time.
The consensus seems to be between both of us that we should start with something that's minimally invasive, right? So start with skincare. And then if somebody has a really severe case that requires urgent treatment and you want the acne to settle down quickly so that it doesn't turn into scars, right? So that's the case in which you would give some form of medication to control the acne. But then again, it's not medication is not something you can take for forever. It does have its fair share of side effects, and at the end of the day, you do need skincare to really manage your acne in the long term. So my approach to building a skincare routine again is very, very similar to yours. Cleanser, moisturizer, sunscreen, and an active. Obviously, there's no very hard and fast demarcation between an active and another product. So, for example, salicylic acid cleanser is a cleanser and it contains an active at the same time. Then I have creme B3, B5E, which contains niacinamide, which is considered to be an active, puts it into a moisturizer. So there's no hard and fast demarcation that an active product is going to be a separate product altogether. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. But generally, what you're looking for is cleanser, moisturizer, sunscreen, and treatment, and that's it. And you want to start as simple as possible, especially if your skin is problematic, because a lot of people come and they're like, what about toner? What about this and what about that? You don't need all of that stuff. And especially if your skin is problematic, the simpler the better, because if something isn't working for you, it's much easier to pick that out in a four-step skincare routine than it is in a 10-step one. And if you're using actives, it's also generally a good idea to introduce them one by one at a time, right? Yeah, as opposed to
putting 2, 3, so if you're using vitamin C, if you're using retinol, if you're using niacinamide, you can't figure out what is making you break out, right? And making your skin more irritable. So it's better. I always tell people, give it 2, 3 weeks to work. You will see if there's purging or not. You will see if your skin is accepting the product or not, and then add on a new active. People want to start the vitamin C, they want to start the niacinamide, they want to start the retinol. Once they start the skincare, they want to do the hyaluronic acid, the niacinamide, the retinol. This is what you see on Google or Instagram.
Hyaluronic acid and vitamin C aren't even ingredients for acne. In all honesty, that's another thing. So many people come and they're like, "We have acne. Should we use vitamin C?" No, vitamin C is not. it's not really. I think sodium ascorbyl phosphate is the only one that has some link, but honestly, I mean, you have such good ingredients for acne available already. Why would you want to go for something that's like a very substandard or a very something that doesn't work really well for acne? So for me, I think in terms of actives for acne, again, you want chemical exfoliants are great, something that unclogs pores, and in that case, salicylic acid is hands down the best for one very specific reason. And that is that unlike other chemical exfoliants, it's the only one that's actually able to penetrate your pore.
Because it's
It's oil
fat
soluble.
soluble.
Yes.
It's fat soluble.
It
It's
is
oil
fat
soluble.
soluble.
It's fat soluble. Others are water soluble. They remain
Haan, they remain on the
glycolic
surface
acid
of the
remains on the
skin.
surface of the skin.
Glycolic
this-
acid is a very small molecule, so it does get absorbed beyond the surface of your skin, but it's not fat soluble, so it's not going to go into the pore and then break up that clog that's really causing
Sebum
the
is
acne.
basically, the thickened sebum is causing the
Thickened
acne.
sebum, and even when you have acne,
Dead
your
keratin
skin,
values.
yeah,
Dead
your,
keratin as well.
the skin cells don't flake off properly; they flake
So
off in
basically,
chunks. So this,
your keratinized epithelium, the dead
Yeah.
keratin valley top there, that also doesn't break off. Na?
yeah.
So salicylic acid would be my top product.
So
In a cleanser, in an
Or-
emulsion form,
depending
or a
on
serum
whether
form,
you're
any
new to
form.
it or not,
Yeah.
like start slow and then build up, like with any
Once
active.
a week. I always tell start once a week. You can't use it every day. You will over exfoliate your skin. You'll damage your skin barrier, and you'll end up with more acne, with dry, red, irritable skin. Start an active once a week only, and always patch test.
Always patch test. Usually, I would say once a week would be a good rule of thumb. Generally, when I've recommended it to people, I've told them over time. This is something I've learned because my skin is not that sensitive, but a lot of people have varying levels of sensitive skin, and one of the things I've seen is generally I tell them not to exceed 2 to 3 times a week, especially if they're starting out, and then slowly build up, assess how well their skin is tolerating the product, and then sort of take it from there.
So for you and for me, I think you use it every day, right? More or less.
I am these days. I'm basically alternating between salicylic acid and tretinoin.
So exactly what I'm using, right? So I'm using tretinoin, medical grade retinoid, which is the strongest strength, plus salicylic acid. I alternate. So that is the thing that you can. So you can't use. Can you use BHAs together with the retinoid? What is your take on it?
Look, I think if you're new to skincare, no. If you are familiar with your skin, if you're experienced with it, if you're very tuned in and you know when your skin needs a break and when it doesn't, go ahead. For me personally, I've done it. But again, it's not something I would do every day because it'll get very irritating. But occasionally, I think if I were to, if I do it occasionally, sometimes I use it in cleanser format and then I follow up with the retinoid. Sometimes I can use both of them together, but it's not an everyday thing because even for somebody who doesn't have sensitive skin like mine, if I use it a couple of days in a row, I will start to notice that my skin is feeling really dry and tight, and that's a sign that your skin needs a
Now
break.
you're damaging skin barrier.
Barrier, yeah.
So you need to have a good skin barrier for a good, shiny, healthy, glowing
100%.
skin. If your skin barrier is so, what happens is when you're overusing retinoids
Yeah.
and you're over exfoliating your skin, so
Yeah.
you can't use active. You're going to alternate the active. You can't use a retinol serum or retinoid every single day.
Along
You
with
can't
salicylic
use
acid and
salicylic.
everything.
So even if you're very common, everyone's like we're using Paula's Choice every day, right? It's a toner, we're using it as toner, we're just dabbing it on, but still it's an active. It's salicylic acid. You can't use salicylic acid 6 or 7
For a
days
lot
a
of people,
week.
for a lot of people, you can't.
You can't. So I've done that. I've used BHA coupled with retinoids. I use it maybe once a week even because so my skin has become used to it over a period of time. You need to give your skin time to adjust to the ingredient. You can't just put on really strong actives on your face
100%.
just from the beginning. So from the get-go, start with a lesser strength. Start once a week or twice a week. Do not exfoliate. Chemical exfoliation is more than enough if you're using it twice a week. For an average person, twice a week is
Generally.
more than enough.
Yeah.
You don't need it. For people who have comedones, people who have congested skin, yes, you can knock it up, but you need to know your skin, and with active, you can't mess around.
You need to still start slowly and find your threshold, essentially.
Yes.
I think that's the critical thing.
Listen
This
to
is
your
different
skin.
from
Listen to your skin.
Exactly. And listening to your skin typically means that if, for example, if you're using an active and at some point your skin is starting to feel really dry and tight, that's a sign that you maybe need to take a day off or 2 days off, moisturize really well, and then go back into it. So I think that's the first sign where you start experiencing dryness, that now your skin is going to start reacting to it because your barrier is getting
Becomes
compromised.
red, it's become flaky,
And
and
even before it gets to that redness
photosensitive.
point,
Yes, you feel itching and
you
burning.
feel
It's
dryness,
dry, tight, and
tightness.
it stings.
Yeah.
Tightness is there, it stings a little bit whenever you're putting a product or even a moisturizer stings on your face.
Even
right?
something that you have been using before without problem will start stinging.
Yeah, so
So,
इसलिए so make sure that if you're turning red, if you're turning dry, if it's stinging, and if you're feeling dry and dry, just stop the actives for a while.
Yeah.
Just moisturize and sunscreen. That's it. This is what I tell people: take a break. It's not necessary that if I've given you the products to use it on every alternate night that you have to use it. Just see how your skin is reacting to it.
So I want to mention a caveat here. So some products generally, for example, in a lot of cases when you start chemical exfoliants, a lot of people experience some stinging in the beginning. To some extent, if that stinging is lasting only for a couple of minutes before subsiding, that's normal. That just means kind of start slowly, and that's normal, and over time your skin will get used to it. So that's not a cause for concern per se. But if you've been using something for a long time and your skin is starting to sting, maybe you're overusing it or something. So that also varies on a case by cases. So in some cases, if it's just lasting for a few minutes and then subsiding, that's okay. But if it's not going away and your skin is turning red, then that's a sign that something is either not suiting you or you've overdone it or something along those lines. So I think this is something that deserves a podcast of its own: acne scars and acne scar treatments. But let's just quickly kind of touch upon acne scars and acne marks and their treatments. um, what are the types, why do they occur, and what can people do about them in terms of skincare and in office treatments?
So basically, with acne marks, so whenever there are different kinds of skin types, right? For people, there are people who are pigmentation prone. At times, there will be a big pimple; it won't leave a mark for you, right? But Asian skin, where skin type 4 5, basically we tend to pigment. Acne tends to leave scars for most of the people, cystic acne in their case. And if you're popping a pimple, every time you pop a pimple, believe you me, it will leave a scar. The more the manipulation on your face, the more you scratch them, the more marks they will leave. If you leave them alone, do good skincare, moisturize and put a sunscreen, it will probably heal on its own. But whenever there is cystic acne, it tends to leave scar. Your skin has to have a scarring potential. So it's basically the collagen bundles. Whenever there's inflammation, the collagen bundles, when they're laying down, they don't lay down like this normally. They're in a haphazard fashion. That is why you get scarring, right? So with different kind of scars, there are different kind of treatments. With ice pick scars, you can do TCA cross, which is a 35% to 50% to maybe 100% TCA peel. That you just put the TCA paint with either a toothpick or a paint, and it lifts the scars up, right? Then there is microneedling. Microneedling can be alone with a dermapen. Derma rollers I tend to discourage. Dermapen is more professional. Then you have RF microneedling, which is radiofrequency microneedling. Scarlet, Morpheus, Silphum, all of these are radiofrequency microneedling. Then you have CO2 laser resurfacing. CO2 laser resurfacing coupled with PRP has become gold standard for acne scars. Reduces all kinds of acne scars, ranging from ice pick to box-like to atrophic scars and to rolling scars as well. But it has its cons. It has a downtime of good 7 to 10 days. Then it can lead to pigmentation in our skin type. So you need to prep the skin before doing laser resurfacing. Then there is on top of that full thickness erbium YAG laser resurfacing. That has a downtime of good 1 to 2 months. You burn the whole skin. Yes, the results are remarkable, but you can't go out in the sunlight for a good couple of months. And the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation. So you're removing the scars, you're giving the pigmentation. So you have to have this in mind that if on Asian skin you're trying to go for erbium YAG, because people come to me, हमारा erbium laser resurfacing कर दें जी. So this is something that I face every single day, and you need to educate the people that a procedure is written, yes, but there are pros and cons to every procedure. You need to figure out a balance, and you need to figure out what suits your skin the best, and that these treatments require multiple sessions. With multiple sessions, you require minimum 4 to 6 sessions of every treatment. So with active acne, you will do chemical peels. Yes, that also requires sessions, but especially for scarring in particular, requires multiple sessions. Some people are fast responders, some people are slow responders. You can't tell just by looking at someone's face how they will respond. You need to do a couple of sessions, and they have a cumulative effect. Collagen production starts in 30 days, keeps going on for the next 90 days. So you're trying to induce collagen. And whenever you're giving trauma to the skin, you want it to heal. The rationale behind it, microneedling, behind laser resurfacing, is that you're giving trauma to the skin, you're either burning the skin, you're either puncturing it with a needle, and you want new skin to form, and the new collagen bundles that form, they are much more uniform. So scarring reduces, the depth reduces, the appearance reduces, but you will not be able to get rid of 100% of the scars. If someone is promising that, they're lying to your face. So, इसलिए scarring requires a lot of time, effort, and commitment. at the patient's end and at the doctor's end as well. Expertise as well, but a lot of patience. I tell people that you need to be mentally prepared to spend at least 6 to 8 months, maybe a year to improve the scarring. I can't wave a magic wand in one. For atrophic scars, is something that you can do. You can do PRP, you can do filler, and you can inject that. You do subcision. So you go underneath the scar, you break the scar with the needle, and you fill it either with the filler or with the plasma of the person. That lifts the atrophic scars. That is the only kind of scarring that is not going to improve with microneedling quite a bit. Yes, it tends to improve the skin thickness, but you require for atrophic scars especially, you need to put in a little bit of hyaluronic acid fillers, or you need to put in plasma, the PRP, and do subcision as well. Thick tethered scars that are stuck to the skin, they require subcision as well. So it's a multifactorial, it's a multi-procedure approach. You can't just do one procedure. Whenever I realize that whenever I combine two treatments, and monotherapy doesn't work. Whenever you're combining treatments, they tend to give better results.
Okay. Okay, and what about acne marks, right? Just the hyperpigmentation. What do you do about that?
Hyperpigmentation, so उसके लिए we do chemical peels. In office treatments, we're doing chemical peels because the strength is stronger. We're using 20% salicylic acid, 15% or 30% glycolic acid, maybe up till a 50% lactic acid, because lactic acid is not as strong as compared to glycolic acid, right? So I would do a combination glycolic lactic peel which has 30% glycolic, 20% lactic acid in it. That's a short contact therapy. You just let it stay on the face for 2 minutes to 5 minutes. And peels are very tricky, especially for Asian skin. So you need to know what you're doing. You need to patch test again and again. You need to see the face of the patient again and again. Whether it's frosting, it's turning red, and you need to neutralize that peel. When you're using these AHAs and BHAs at home, you don't need to neutralize that. You need to, when in office treatments, you need to neutralize that. Then in skincare, I tend to give, so my top products again would be salicylic, mandelic, glycolic acid, all these actives, but in a very, very less quantity and a less strength. A 5% glycolic acid cream twice a week is more than enough. A 10% lactic acid serum or a 10% mandelic acid serum is more than enough. I don't ask the person to use it every single day. Then there are other ingredients like niacinamide, like kojic acid, like arbutin, all these things, licorice extract, these things, anything that's, so a hydroquinone, so we've moved away from hydroquinone. Hydroquinone used to be a big thing back in my day, but now we've moved away because we know that it causes exogenous spraying of the skin. It damages your skin, makes it more prone to getting certain types of skin cancers as well. So we're moving away from hydroquinone. So please don't use anything that has hydroquinone in it. There are a lot of creams in the market that are being used for acne marks, for melasma, that has hydroquinone in it. Don't buy that over the counter. Use, so these medical grade products, they have lots of research behind it. So all these actives, when used judiciously, like glycolic, lactic, mandelic acid, all these improve acne marks. You give it a bit of patience, you give it 6 weeks, 8 weeks, most of the acne pigmentation fades away on its own with these actives as well. And yes, we were talking about the vitamin C. Vitamin C works here. When you are using it, it doesn't work for acne, but vitamin C works very nicely for acne marks. I usually layer it in the morning. You wash your face, you put on the vitamin C, yes, and you moisturize it, then you put on your sunscreen. That is how I layer my vitamin C.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to do it because it enhances the protection that you're getting from the sun as well with its free radical fighting properties. So yeah, and I think the last thing that people need to be aware of again is that it's not an overnight process. Even marks, some a lot of times marks will even go away on their own, but they just take time. So that's basically it. It's not it takes, and what I've noticed is usually the acne doesn't take as much time as the marks. The marks actually take longer to go away. They're more annoying. That's why we kind of try to control the acne quickly and prevent them in the first place. And I think with both marks and scars, the quicker you start treatment, the better your skin will respond.
I agree. So when your acne scars are pink,
yeah.
If you touch it at that time, so if you've had acne scar for 10 years, it is going to be much more problematic to treat that and will require more number of sessions. If you start, let's say, your acne marks have settled now, you have that pink skin and that scar is in the pink time. If you start microneedling done, then it requires lesser number of sessions, doesn't let the scar become deeper, and it will give you better results. So the quicker you start treatment, same for the marks, same for the scars, the better the results, the quicker the results, and the lesser the amount and thickness of scarring. So that is how I guide people as well. I tell them that once the acne settles down, and you can't do these things on active acne, This is what I tell people whenever there is active inflammation on the face. You can do the acne treatments, you can do salicylic acid creams, you can do the LED lights. But treatment for scarring starts when the active inflammation is down. If you touch the face when there is active inflammation on the face, it will mess it up, it will make it worse. It micro needling is not the cure for acne. ठीक है ना?
Yes.
That is if you take one thing from me today is micro needling is not a treatment to treat acne. On active acne, it's a horrible. Hydrofacial for comedonal acne is wonderful. For active cystic acne, hydrofacial is a horror story, right? So people are like, ek do dane the hamare muh pe, we got a hydrofacial and we broke out like crazy. So you're just moving bacteria around, right? For comedonal acne, it's changed my skin. So hydrofacial, my skin loves hydrofacial. But again, it's not for everyone. My skin loves microneedling. But again, it's not for everyone. So you need, and how will we decide? The doctors will see and decide what we can do for you. But I can't decide without doing a treatment for you whether it will work out for you or not. So you need to take the risk for the treatment as well. You need to just put yourself out there if you want the scarring to get better.
All right. So I think on that note, we've covered a lot of ground today. We started out with what is acne, what causes acne, oral medications for acne. Then we covered skincare for acne and how to build a skincare routine. And finally, we have discussed acne marks and treatments for acne scars, ranging from skincare actives to in-office treatments. So I think we've covered a whole lot of ground here today. So on that note, let's close the session off. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Please do let me know what you thought in the comments below. If there are any specific topics or questions that you have that you would like for us to cover in future podcasts and in future videos, please drop those in the comments as well. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will see you again in the next podcast.